Rabbi Yossi Jacobson.
I want to share with you today a very special story. The story was told by the rabbi of a city called Elizabeth in New Jersey. His name was Harav Pinchas Teitz, Rabbi Pinchas Teitz of blessed memory, who was a great Talmud Chacham, a great rabbi, a well-known leader here in America. Now today, people make trips from America to Russia, from Russia to America very frequently. But for many, many years, you know, there was what they used to call the Iron Curtain between Russia and the rest of the world. It was very difficult to travel back and forth. People who lived in Russia usually could not get out. And if you wanted to make a visit, it was a very complicated procedure. Communism then was very powerful, and the communist regime in the Soviet Union had held its citizens in a very, very tough grip, and to visit could be very dangerous. One of the people who visited Russia in those difficult years was Rabbi Teitz. Rabbi Teitz knew that Lubavitch Chabad has an underground network in Russia. Already from the days, as you know, of the Rebbe Rayatz, and then continued by the Rebbe, there were underground secret schools, yeshivas, chadarim, mikvahs, shuls, svarim, get-togethers, fabrengens, all in secret. And the Rebbe had secret communication with many of his people in Russia, although it was kept completely confidential, because if any information would be exposed, the people could be severely punished. Even the letters were masked. The title that they used to use when they wanted to write a letter to the Rebbe was Zayda, to the grandfather, so that when the government, the censors, would read their letters, it was written to the Zayda, to the grandfather. So they didn't have a suspicion that it's being written to a Rebbe, and never mind Schneerson, who were not looked at very positively in Russia because of all the problems the Friedecker Rebbe gave them. And there was nothing involved in spreading Yiddishkeit and religion, which was forbidden in communist Russia. So before Rabbi Teitz would go to Russia, he would always go into the Rebbe and receive from him requests or suggestions or instructions what to do, who to visit, what to bring to the country. Rabbi Teitz was not a chassid, not a chassid at all, but he was a close friend to the Rebbe, and he tried to help any way he can the Russian Jews, and in this case the Chabad Hasidim in Russia. Once, before such a journey, he went in to the Rebbe's room, And he informed the Rebbe that he is soon going to travel to Russia. And they spoke about different plans and different suggestions. And then the Rebbe said to him, I want to ask you for a favor. Sure. And the Rebbe took out a Tanya and says, please share this Tanya with the Hasidim that you will meet in Russia, and tell them that this Tanya I sent with you. Rabbi Tait said, with pleasure, no problem. He takes the Tanya. When he opens the Tanya, he sees that the Rebbe actually wrote his name on his Tanya. It was his personal Tanya that he was learning from. A few days later, he calls up Rabbi Chadakov, Rabbi Chaim Mordechai Isaac Chadakov. Olav Hashalom was a personal secretary of the Rebbe. And he tells Rabbi Chadakov, please tell the Rebbe that I apologize, but I can't take the Tanya. Why? The expert that goes through everything I take to Russia to make sure it's kosher looked at the Tanya, and when he opened it, he said, Rabbi Taitz, don't take this book. I said, why? He says, the Russians are going to open it, they're going to see. It says, Mesifrei, and the Rebbe's name and his last name, Schneerson. The Schneersons are persona non grata in Russia. They are not welcome there. They are considered to be great troublemakers. The Friedrich Rebbe was arrested. The Schneersons are people that are illegal in Russia, and by you carrying a book from Schneerson, you can be arrested. You can be investigated. You can be punished. I don't know what can happen to you. Who knows? Don't take this book. So he tells this to Rabbi Chadakov. Rabbi Chadakov tells Rabbi Taitz, he says, Rabbi Taitz, do you think the Rebbe knows about the situation in Russia? He says, I know he knows about the situation in Russia. He grew up in Russia. Do you think he knows about what the Russians are capable of doing to the Schneersons? I think he knows about it. He knows what they did to his father, Reb Levi Yitzchak, what they did to his father-in-law, what they did to many other Schneersons, what they did to many other Hasidim of the Schneersons. So Rabbi Taitz, do you think the Rebbe would ask you to do something that would endanger your own life? He would give you something knowing that you can end up in prison, or you can end up with many difficulties and challenges. You would think he would want to put you through this? Rabbi Taitz says, obviously not. So Rabbi Chadakov says, trust him. Trust him that he doesn't want you to suffer. Rabbi Taitz, although not being a chassid, can accept the logic of Rabbi Chadakov's argument, and he said, okay, I'm going to take the Tanya. He takes the Tanya, he travels to the Soviet Union, and you have to realize how meetings took place. You couldn't sit down with somebody in shul and say, hey, how are you? Shalom aleichem, aleichem shalom. Because there were spies everywhere. In every official shul there were spies. So basically, in shul, as you were walking and you saw somebody and nobody was looking, you had to whisper, I'll meet you Tuesday, 7 o'clock in the morning in the park. And then you both went 7 o'clock in the morning to the park, and first you were a half a mile away, and then you got closer and you looked 100 times every minute if there's a car, if there's a person, and then you sat down on a bench for a few minutes and you spoke and you left. That's how meetings were arranged. Because of the intense danger, anybody who came from America, they were suspicious, they would follow him, and if he was meeting people, those people were under suspicion and they could suffer terribly afterwards. Rabbi Taitz comes to Russia. In the first city he visited, whether it was Moscow or another city, he went to the shul, he met Chabad Hasidim, and he arranged with them in a very secret, almost sign language communication, that at this and this day, at this and this hour, he wants to meet them in this and this place. And so at that particular hour, a group of Chabadniks living in the Soviet Union came and they met him, and after validating and confirming that no strange eye was observing them. They finally met in this park in a remote location where nobody can see them for a few minutes. Rabbi Taitz turns to them and he says, before I came here, I was by the Rebbe. And he asked me to share something with you. And Rabbi Taitz takes out the Tanya and he says, the Rebbe asked me to share this sefer with you. They looked at the Tanya. It's hard for us today to understand their response. But if you know a little bit about how life then was in Russia and how cut off they were, you can understand it. One of them tells him, Rabbi Taitz, the Rebbe actually touched this Tanya mit seiner heilige Hand. He touched this Tanya with his holy hands. And Rabbi Taitz says, not only did he touch the Tanya with his hands, but this is his own Tanya. He opens up the Tanya, shows them his name, and he gave it to me and asked me to share this Tanya with you and say that it's from him. And the person says, I did not go to the mikveh today. I'm not going to touch the Tanya. But somebody else, with great trepidation, took the Tanya. And for Rabbi Taitz, who was not a chassid, he said himself, it was very strange. Tanya is a holy book. It's a great sefer. But why the trepidation? Why the yirah? Why the awe? And one of them took the Tanya with so much respect and reverence and slowly began to open its pages as though he just encountered a sacred object that he was waiting to touch his entire life. And he and the others started to turn to the pages, page after page after page. And then one of them stopped, and started to read lines from a particular page and became pale and very, very emotional. Rabbi Taitz says, what? And the chassid says, look, a knetch. On this page is a knetch. You know what a knetch is? A knetch is a fold. You know, sometimes in a sefer you have a page that's folded. In Yiddish, this is called a knetch, or in English, a fold. One of the pages was folded. A knetch. So Rabbi Taitz says, okay, a knetch. You know, people that use Sfarim a lot, right? Sometimes they want to hold a place, so they make a knetch, they make a fold, they can come back there. Or if they use it, if you just from frequent using, sometimes the pages bend or fold. The person says, no, you don't understand. This is a fold because here is the answer from the Rebbe. He says, what answer from the Rebbe? And the man tells him, as you know, a little while ago, we heard the news that the government is accepting some requests of citizens for visas and passports and permission to leave the country. And the question was, should we apply for these visas? Because it's very risky in Russia. You can apply and strike lucky and leave. You can apply and then you're accused of being a contre-revolutionnaire, of being somebody who's opposed to the government, somebody who hates Russia, somebody who wants to leave, and you could be sent to Siberia for applying for a visa. So we did not know, should we apply, should we not apply? So we wrote a letter to the Rebbe, but there was no way you could send such a letter to New York. Should I apply for a visa to leave Russia? So what did we do? We wrote a letter and we put it into a Tanya. Here, in this Tanya is the answer. Look, the page is folded. Rabbi Taitz says, where is there an answer? He says, read what it says in the Tanya. That page in Tanya, it said that when you confront, every person has in him negativity. Every human being has in him or her a Yetzer Hara. Every person in him or her has sometimes darkness. And when you see it coming out, what do you have to do? You have to run away as fast as possible. Run as fast as you can. The Chassid said, this is the answer. When you see evil is here and you could run. I have to apply for a visa. Rabbi Teitz was very, very suspicious. He's thinking to himself, this man is going to put himself in danger and apply for a visa to leave Russia because it says in Tanya that you have to run away from evil and there's a fold on the page. He couldn't accept it. On the other hand, I'll speak loud. On the other hand, to tell the Jew not to apply for the visa, how can he take responsibility? Maybe this Jew will get out, and as a result of his suggestion, the Jew will remain stuck in Russia. So he decided, as the Gemara often says, Shev v'al tasa adif, better I'll be passive, I won't do anything. I won't say anything. He bids them farewell. He takes the Tanya and he goes on to the next city. In the next city, he once again meets a group of Chabad Hasidim. He arranges for a meeting with them in the park at a particular day, at a particular hour, and the story repeats itself. When nobody is looking, they sit down. He takes out a Tanya. He says, I was by the Rebbe and he gave me something special for you. They can't believe that it's the Rebbe's Tanya. One of them says, I wasn't in the mikveh, I can't touch it. Somebody finally takes it, starts turning the pages, goes further in the Tanya with tremendous yiras hakavod, tremendous respect. And suddenly the man stops short. And again he's very, very emotional. Rav Tait says, "Was geschehen?" The man says, look, the Rebbe's answer to me. What answer? He points to the page, he says, Aknech. He went to another page in Tanya that had a second fold. Rav Tait is thinking to himself, oh my God, what's going on here? What answer? And the man says, the same story. As you know, now people are applying. The question was to apply or not to apply. I knew I can't send a letter to New York. I put a question in the Tanya. And here is the answer. You say it's the Rebbe's Tanya. Here's the fold. What does it say there on that page in Tanya? In that page in Tanya it says that in life, sometimes you can take the negativity, the darkness, the Yetzer Hara, the evil that's in you, and transform it into goodness. You can change it around and use it for the good. Some things in your life you have to run away from. Some things in your life you could transform and use for good. Because even the greatest darkness that you have in your life has in it a spark of goodness, and you turn it around. This is my answer. The Rebbe is saying that somehow I have to remain here and transform my situation to the best of my ability into a positive experience. Not to run away, to remain in Russia. And Rav Teitz is thinking to himself, this Jew is not going to apply for a visa based on a fold on a page that the Rebbe probably made maybe 10 years ago when he was learning the Tanya. How can he think this way? He wants to tell him no. But then again, how can he take responsibility? And what if he applies for a visa and gets arrested? Again, he says nothing. But he's thinking to himself, this is mamash great. Because if you learn Tanya, half of the Tanya basically says, run away from evil. And the other half of Tanya says, transform it. So half of the Tanya says, get out of Russia. And the other half of Tanya says, stay in Russia. This is awesome. But he's quiet. He keeps his thoughts to himself. Closes the Tanya. And when he closes the Tanya, he says goodbye to them. Or leaves them the Tanya. Or goes to another city. He concludes his visit a few weeks later, returns to the United States. As always, he comes to New York. He pays a second visit by the Rebbe to give a report. He's in the Rebbe's room and he shares everything that occurred in Russia. He decides to himself that he's not going to talk to the Rebbe about what happened with the Tanya, because it was very painful for him. And he felt that the Rebbe is going to be very sad to know that because of the folds on the pages, these Jews decided to apply for a visa or not to apply for a visa. The Rebbe carries enough responsibility on his shoulders. Why burden him with these responsibilities that he might feel guilty, or he might feel upset, or he might feel agitated about that they're making such major decisions based on the knetch, based on the fold. So he decides not to bring up the topic. In the middle of the conversation, he sees that the Rebbe is looking to hear something. He doesn't know what, he's quiet. Finally, after they discussed everything, the Rebbe turns to him politely and he says, "Did you have a chance to take the Tanyas?" They're conversing in Yiddish. So he says, "Yes." "Did you have a chance to give it over to the Hasidim in the different cities that you visited?" He says, "Yes. Ich hab sie gegeben, ich hab sie gewissen dem Tanya. I showed them the Tanya." And then Rebbe looks at him and asks this question in Yiddish. He says, "The Knetchen haben sie gesehen?" Did they see the Knetchen? Did they see the folds on the pages? And that moment, Rabbi Taitz, who shared the story, said that moment he understood something of the relationship between a chassid and a Rebbe. Because sometimes a Rebbe communicates in words. Sometimes a Rebbe communicates in writing. Sometimes the Rebbe communicates through eyes. Sometimes the Rebbe communicates with a gesture of his arm or hand. And sometimes the Rebbe communicates through a knetch, through a fold in the page. No, yeah.
קבוצה מאוד מאוד איכותית ומיוחדת בעם ישראל. הם מגדירים את עצמם החילוניים הרוחניים. זה אלפי אנשים שלומדים כל מיני גרפולוגיה, אסטרולוגיה, קריאה בקפה, קיצור אין סוף סוגים ומקצועות בתחום הזה הרוחני, והם מבינים שמקור רוחניות זה בא מהיהדות, והם מזמינים אותי לסדרת הרצאות בתחום של קבלה, חסידות וכאלה ברדיו. הזמינו אותי לשדר באופן קבוע פתיחה באגרות קודש ברדיו 103 FM, ורואים ניסים וניסי ניסים. מה שרואים ממש ביום יום, שהרבי דרך האגרות קודש מגיע לקהלים ואי אפשר לתאר עד כמה.
בנפשך מדבר ידה לא דס קרס ידה